Welcome back to Maria Amigos. I'm your host, Maria Cardona, and I'm here with my co-host, Christina Carrica-Haley, and we're so excited to welcome actress, comedian, writer, producer, Cristela Alonzo. Cristela, thank you so much for coming on Maria today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Cristela, you were the first Latina to create, produce, and star in your own network sitcom. I want to talk to you about what your experience in Hollywood was. And I also know that you have also done some things to move forward the effort of the Latino Museum, and you want to continue to help that effort. How are those two things connected?
So let me just say that I grew up in a border town in South Texas. I grew up in the McAllen, Texas area. And growing up in that area, I was never really, I was never really motivated to really chase after my dreams, because the people in my community, we come from a thinking where survival is most important. Dreams are a luxury. There was something that I really had in me that I just wanted to do. But I never realistically thought that I could have the chance, because you didn't get to see a lot of representation in TV and film. So you already knew the doubts were, the odds were against you. So when I had my show, I found it very problematic. I found it a big struggle to deal with Hollywood, in that I realized that in the room, I was considered so special, so different. And the weird thing is that when you're special and different, when you're one of the only ones, if not the only one in the room, they don't know what to do with you. So especially with Latinos, with Latinas, the problem is, right, we actually represent so many different countries that people don't know about, right? So it's this thing where they had me as a Latina. They wanted me to represent Cubans, Puerto Ricans, Hondurans. I couldn't do that. I'm Mexican. You know what I mean? So, and even then, I couldn't even represent Mexican culture, because I grew up in South Texas in a border town. When I moved to Los Angeles, I realized that the Mexican culture in Los Angeles was different from the one I grew up in Texas. So it's this thing where, because the representation is so lacking, we are expected to be perfect for everyone. And that's impossible. And it's that stress that we have, where I grew up loving television. I would watch TV shows like Roseanne. I never saw Roseanne and thought, oh, all white mothers are like that. But with TV shows, especially with Latino representation, we have to represent everything. And my whole point was, I can tell you my story, and I can tell you everything. I can be honest about my story. And I can tell you that thematically, my story is universal to everyone. People that struggle paycheck to paycheck. I grew up Catholic. People that grew up in a religious household. The traditions that we have, everything. We can connect with people. And that was a thing that I realized. You can't succeed if you go into a room and you have to teach lessons while you're trying to present those lessons. So for me, that was just something that really frustrated me, which is why the Latino Museum is so important. I'm a big museum nerd. I've gone to every Smithsonian. I've seen every space shuttle except the one in Florida. And, it's this thing where I realized, if we don't know our history, and if people don't know our history, then how on earth can we trust them to let us tell our stories in a real way? So that's the thing that happens. If we don't have facts, we can't tell stories without facts. Facts are not biased. Opinions are.
Oh, Cristela, thank you so much for pointing out how diverse our community is. I mean, we have Colombia, Argentina, and Mexico right here. So I wonder, though, you're in the entertainment business, huge fan, love your content on social media right now. So why the museum instead of maybe something that is an organization to help Latinos get into Hollywood? Do you think that the history being present, obviously with your museum trips, is that what, will help everything else move along?
So for me, I actually do both. And that's what you realize, is that if you want the needle to move, you got to work in all the worlds you can get access to, right? So currently, I'll tell you that on the Hollywood side, I'm working with Disney, and we started a mentoring program during the COVID where I mentor 3 writers. The project is new. We just started it. So I was able to create my own role in the program. So what I found really important was that in those meetings with executives and talent, I could actually explain certain cultural aspects that executives couldn't understand. I'll use an example. There was a story where a character, this girl was had lost her culture because she had been embarrassed by people for the way that she spoke Spanish. The executive said, well, what if we just have her not know the language and then she learns it along the way? And immediately I stopped and said, you can't do that because learning a language isn't realistic in the time of the story. So we're already demeaning, like we're already minimizing the Spanish language. So I think a more natural story is what she said because she lived it. I'm in my 40s. When I was a kid, I was part of the people that like, they didn't want you to speak Spanish at school. You know, that's a very authentic story to so many, and we don't get to see that story. So why don't we tell that story? Because it's different, you know? So for me, that's the Hollywood side. But the Latino side, I mean, look, I was telling the story recently about, I went to the Smithsonian, one of the museums, and they had the exhibit for migrant farm workers. And you see the picture of Cesar Chavez, and you see the picture of Dolores Huerta. And I'm the person that reads all the exhibits. And then we get to the part where they break down the contribution of Filipinos in the farm worker movement. And it wasn't until then, a couple years ago, that I really understood the contribution, how they work together, the alliance between Latinos and Filipinos, that let's say that I wanted to tell a story about that time. Filipino and Latino farm workers uniting in alliance. I actually have proof from the Smithsonian that that is an actual fact that happened. That is why we need the Latino Museum. And that's why we need people doing the work in Hollywood. I mean, for me, I made history becoming the first Latina, to have their own network show that I did everything for. I was the first Latina to star in a Pixar movie. And that was in 2017. So that shows you that when we break down the door, we can't just break down the door. Yeah. We got to make sure that other people walk through it too. That, but not everyone can do that. Only people that really want to do that and believe in that should try to do it, because if the effort is artificial, we can also sense that it's artificial.
Cristela, we have so much more to discuss with you, so stay with us. Amigos, no se me vayan. We have more with Cristela after the break. This is Maria. Welcome back to Maria, amigos. I'm your host, Maria Cardona, and I'm here with my co-host, Christina Carrica-Haley, and we're talking to our good friend, actress, comedian, writer, producer, Cristela Alonzo. Cristela, I love the connections that you are making between the experience that you have had in Hollywood and how it might have been different had a Latino museum been in existence already, and something that a lot of people normally go to when they go to see museums on the mall, right? I believe that that would be the case in my life as well, in politics, for example. So I would love for you to continue threading that needle. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, so this is interesting, right? Because first of all, you had Tony Cardenas, who is my rep. Actually, he's my state rep. I'm in his district.
He used to be my
I was watching
that way. Yeah.
I was watching him and thinking, you better have good answers. You rep me.
That's awesome. I love that.
We have never met, but I receive texts and emails from him, so I keep in touch on what he's doing. But it is that thing where you were asking him about basically why it took so long to get anything passed, to make any kind of movement. And the thing is that we're living in an important, weird, unknown time right now in history, where people are actually slowly understanding across the country that their voice actually has power. And that is something that for so many years, we didn't know that. The movement is right now. And right now, we have to take advantage of the heat that we have. So in order to do that, I mean, it's this thing where for so long, I think that a lot of the representation, a lot of the profiles that we know about the Latino community has been very one-sided. Look, we won the face of immigration, right? When we talk about immigration, it's always Latinos. There's other people from other countries that come here. We're the ones that are always known as the immigration face, right? So like I come from a mixed status family. My brother, Ruben, the oldest one, he became a naturalized citizen in 2016 after decades of trying. But I remember I went to his naturalization ceremony and I asked him, how does it feel to be American? And he looked at me and he said, Chris, I've always been American. It just took this country this long to figure it out. Sometimes I learn history and I get so excited about it. I want to say that, the creator of the beauty, the sponge, the one that we use, the little like teardrop shaped sponge, that was, I think, invented by a Latina. I want to say that hand sanitizer was invented by a Latina.
Love that.
So, it's this thing where it's like, hey, we've been here. And it shouldn't be so hard for people to know, hey, guess what? That thing that you like, we did that. So right now we take advantage of our history. We empower the kids, we empower the future generations, and we empower the generations that are behind us by showing the legacy that got all of us here. Like for me, this is an important thing. I think about the kids. It's all about the kids and it's all about us knowing where we came from.
Love that. And talking about power, empowerment, and legacy, who were some of your idols, mentors, maybe some of the women that the mainstream media doesn't cover? I mean, we know Rita Morena, but even Rita Moreno doesn't get the coverage that she should.
Actually, my mentor in life is Dolores Huerta. Dolores has been mentoring me for the past 6 years or so. And it's this thing during election years, we will go and canvass areas together to get out the vote in the Latino communities. I remember an event, Dolores and I were in a minivan. We were driving to this event and I asked her, what is one of the best things about the work you do? Like why after all these years? What is it? And she said her favorite thing was showing people that they were powerful, them accepting it, and then them going somewhere else to some other person and teaching them about the power. And that always spoke to me because I realized she and I have talked a lot about how it's really about when you do the work, it's not about the big picture. It's about all the people involved in how you do it in this moment right now. After the 2016 election, I always tell this story because this was a very moving story for me. I was not expecting the results. And I was very devastated. So I had puffy eyes from crying. And I was with her the day after the election. I was moderating a panel for Dolores and Sonia Sanchez, who's a Black poet, powerful from the civil rights movement. I walked into the green room and my eyes are all swollen. And Dolores looks at me and she's like, why are you crying? And I kept thinking, oh my God, she doesn't know. You know what I mean? Like, oh my God, am I the one? Am I the one that's going to tell?
Am I going to be the one to tell her?
Yeah, I'm like, oh my God. So I look at her like what? And I just took a moment. I'm like, well, I'm sad because of the election. And she looks at me and she said, this is the first time your country's broken your heart. It won't be the last.
Oh my goodness.
And she was sitting next to Sonia and she looks at her and she says, you remember Nixon? And they start laughing and laughing. But then she said the most beautiful thing to me. She actually looked at me and she said, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be angry. You live in that moment and you let all those feelings come through. And then you know what you do? You wake up the next day and you keep fighting. And you fight because you're so sad. And you fight because you're so angry. And you fight because you know what's right. And you fight and fight and fight and realize that all you learned is that maybe that way that you fought wasn't right for that moment. But the fighting never stops. And the fighting only can be effective and comes from the heart when you accept that you're sad. And that, to me, is one of the best pieces of advice I have ever gotten. And I hate that when people talk about activists, Dolores Huerta is a name that's known in the Latino community, but it is not a mainstream name that people know when it comes to female activists, anybody. Yeah, and it should be, because those lessons, like right there, that story, we need more of those stories out in public, because that story isn't for Latinos. That story is for everyone.
And that right there crystallizes why we need a Latino museum. Cristela, thank you so much for everything that you're doing to help us tell our stories. Thank you for your continued advocacy for the Latino Museum. And thank you for being on Maria today. Amiga, gracias.
Thank you.